The crash was a scream of tearing metal followed by a deafening silence. One moment, the small private plane was a bubble of luxury high above the clouds. The next, it was a broken toy swallowed by the furious, endless ocean. In the chaos of cold water and rising panic, two strangers were thrown together into a raw fight for life. One was Victoria Hayes, a powerful CEO whose world was built on control and comfort. The other was Daniel Cole, a struggling single dad who knew only how to endure. As the last of the wreckage sank into the dark depths, they clung to a piece of floating debris, two specks of life in a vast, indifferent sea. Drifting toward the faint outline of a deserted island, they had no idea that this brutal end to their old lives was the violent beginning of a new one, a story that would bind their souls in ways neither could have ever imagined. Victoria was known for her sharp mind and even sharper reputation. In the corporate world, she was a force of nature, a young CEO who had built an empire from nothing. People admired her brilliance but whispered about her ruthlessness. To get to the top, she had walled off her heart so completely that she had forgotten the feeling of needing anyone. Daniel was her complete opposite. A single father who had lost his wife years ago, his life was a patchwork of odd jobs and sacrifices, all to provide for his little girl. The world had taught him patience and the deep value of love, lessons that were worthless in the boardrooms Victoria commanded. But fate had now stripped them bare. On this island of sand and silence, there was no CEO, no struggling father, only two human beings, broken and trying to survive. The first few days were a blur of terror. Victoria, whose hands were used to signing million-dollar deals, trembled as she faced a world with no phone signal, no assistance, and no easy solutions. The certainty she had always known was gone, replaced by the gnawing fear of starvation and the unknown. Daniel, though just as scared, pushed his own fear down. He had a daughter to think about, a reason to fight. He guided Victoria through the basics of survival: how to build a fire from scratch, how to crack open coconuts for their precious milk, and how to weave palm fronds into a crude shelter. At first, her pride made her resist his help. She was not a woman who took orders. But the relentless ache of hunger and the bone-deep weariness of exhaustion were humbling teachers. The nights were the worst. When the sun bled into the horizon, the darkness felt absolute, and the roar of the ocean grew louder, a constant reminder of their isolation. Staring up at the vast blanket of stars, Victoria felt smaller than she ever had in her life. She lay on the sand, her expensive blouse now torn and stiff with salt, thinking of the life she left behind. She owned mansions, luxury cars, and a fortune that could buy anything, except safety, except peace. On the other side of the flickering fire, Daniel watched her. He saw past her hardened exterior to the loneliness she tried so hard to hide. It was a loneliness he knew well, a quiet companion in his own life. Days melted into weeks. The rhythm of their lives became dictated by the sun and the tides. Survival forced them into a partnership. They learned to fish with sharpened sticks, to find edible roots, and to read the moods of the weather. They were a team, not by choice but by necessity. In this raw, unfiltered existence, the walls they had built around themselves began to crumble. Sometimes Victoria would break down, her tears mixing with the salt water on her face as she confessed how terrifying it was to live without control. In those moments, Daniel wouldn't offer empty platitudes. He would just sit with her, a quiet, steady presence. Other times, Daniel would speak of his daughter, his voice thick with emotion as he described her smile, or the songs he used to sing her to sleep. Slowly, almost without them noticing, they began to rely on each other for more than just survival. They were leaning on each other for warmth, for hope, for the simple human connection their hearts had been starved of for so long. One evening, after a vicious storm tore through the island and ripped away half of their shelter, they huddled together by a sputtering fire, shivering and soaked. Victoria looked at Daniel, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes wide with a fear that went beyond the storm. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said something she never thought she would say to anyone. "If we can't go back, must I marry you?" It wasn't a proposal. It was a surrender. It was the ultimate confession from a woman who had never surrendered to anything in her life. It was her way of asking, "If this is all that's left, will you promise I won't have to face it alone?" A wave of emotion hit Daniel, so powerful it tightened his chest. He saw the terrified, vulnerable woman behind the CEO mask. He reached out and took her hand, his own calloused and rough, but his touch gentle. He didn't laugh or dismiss her words. He simply met her gaze, his eyes reflecting the same deep-seated loneliness and longing he saw in hers. In that shared silence, a fragile, beautiful thing took root between them. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the possibility of love, a love born not of convenience or shared interests, but from being truly seen. After that night, the island felt a little less like a prison. They started to find moments of joy. They laughed when a crab stole their piece of fruit. They worked together to weave better walls for their shelter. They watched the sunsets, painting the sky in colors so beautiful they ached. Victoria told him about the dreams she had sacrificed for her ambition, and Daniel confessed his deepest fear, that he would never be a good enough father. They found a strange comfort in each other's honesty, as if the island had stripped away all the lies and left only the pure, raw truth of who they were. But their trials were far from over. Hunger was a constant enemy, and the threat of another storm always loomed. Victoria's pride still flared up, causing her to snap at Daniel, only to be filled with a regret so deep she would find herself apologizing, something the old Victoria never did. Daniel, for all his patience, felt the heavy weight of each passing day. Another day his daughter was growing up without him. Their bond wasn't forged in ease, it was tempered in hardship, strengthened each time they chose to face the struggle together. Then, one afternoon, a shape appeared on the horizon. A ship. Tears streamed down both their faces, tears of relief, but also tears of a new and sudden fear. Returning to the world meant returning to their old lives. Would the powerful connection they built here survive the noise and pressure of civilization? Would the CEO retreat back into her cold glass tower? Would the single dad disappear back into his quiet life of struggle? Or was what they found on this island real enough to fight for, strong enough to build a new life upon? The rescue was the end of their ordeal, but it was only the beginning of their true story. Back in her world of ringing phones and demanding schedules, Victoria felt like a stranger in her own life. The power she wielded felt hollow. In her sterile, silent mansion, she missed the sound of the ocean and the warmth of a shared fire. Daniel, finally holding his daughter in his arms, felt an overwhelming joy, but also a profound sense of loss. He missed the woman who had seen him, truly seen him, when he had nothing. The question she had whispered during the storm echoed in both their hearts, a question that now held the weight of their future. Perhaps love isn't meant to be found in perfect settings. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find the one thing that truly matters. And sometimes the most devastating storms don't come to destroy you, but to wash you ashore, right into the arms you were always meant to find.